Sometimes instincts kick in. They rush through your body and have you reacting in ways that you otherwise wouldn't. An event you would normally think through, consider the plan, and other options before jumping into action suddenly becomes something you are doing without thought. You intuitively know what needs to be done, and instead of asking questions about how or why, you ask how you solve the problem that is right in front of you. How do we tackle this task to save another life as we look up at a wall of red rock and think to yourself, I can climb that? And then allowing your gaze to travel up a bit farther, to the precarious ledge that juts out suspiciously like the perfect place to catch a person. And the entire reason your instincts kicked in the first place is dangling there. A man, broken and bruised and hanging on for dear life. And while you didn't set out to become a hero, that is exactly what you become. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Kayla, and we are doing yet another solo episode. And again, thank you for being here. I have not been super forthcoming of lately with kind of some things that are going on behind the scenes. But you may have noticed that in the last 4 months, there's been some audio quality issues, and I've been doing a lot of testing out to find out which recording system is going to be the best system for me to use and what works and what doesn't. And I think I've finally found something, and I'm actually currently using it. So I'm hoping that it works. If it doesn't work, then you won't be listening to this at all. So here's to more consistent and better audio. Hopefully, my fingers are crossed. Now, that's really all I was going to say, just rambling a little bit. On to the reason you are really here. Today we were talking about a person who was deemed a hero, though from what I have gathered through my research, she doesn't really feel that that is the right word. River Berry, a 30-year-old mental health therapist, was out biking in Moab, Utah on November 26, 2022, during a very unique event. Or at least this is a unique event for someone like myself who knows nothing about base jumping. And that is because we simply do not have the landscape to allow for it here in Northwest Ohio. So for those of you like me, base jumping is similar to skydiving in that you are jumping into the air with nothing but a parachute to slow your fall. But instead of an airplane, you are jumping off of a fixed location, such as a cliff. The base part of base jumping is actually an acronym that stands for building, antenna, span, and earth. So these are the things that you can kind of launch yourself off of. The span being something like a bridge, it's spanning a gap between two places, and then earth being something of natural form, such as a cliff. In Moab, Utah, an event called the Turkey Boogie was happening, and this is an annual local base jumping festival put on by the Moab Base Association, or the Moab Base Access. For over a decade, this event has occurred as a way to raise money for the Grand Junction Search and Rescue Team, which plays a critical role in supporting the various outdoor recreational activities that go on here in Moab. Recently, the money raised has been distributed to the search and rescue, as well as the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park System, Children in Need, and others within the community. The money is raised by selling raffle tickets and apparel and, just coming together. And this festival draws hundreds of base jumpers from all over the world. And while the festival may seem like one big party, they have put an emphasis on setting an example of how to recreate responsibly in the wilderness to help lessen their impact on the area, not just in the wild and natural landscapes of the area, but also knowing that when hundreds of people come in from all over the world, it's also impacting the community that's there and the community that maybe isn't quite ready for them to be there. And so they do what they can to stay mindful of not just the natural landscape, but the community and the people who call this place home as well. And the people who come here are pretty experienced people as far as when it comes to throwing themselves out into the air. Generally, from what I have found, a reputable base jumping course requires a person to have experience and skill when it comes to skydiving before they can begin base jumping. Some schools will even say that you need to have completed between 200 and 500 jumps in a skydiving setting before you can join the program for base jumping. And this is because when you are jumping from a fixed location rather than an airplane, there's much less room for error. You need to have the experience and the knowledge to quickly assess and handle mid-flight problems that occur in order to land safely on the ground. Some other differences between base jumping and skydiving include that you only have one parachute. So if something goes wrong with your first, you have no reserve, no backup to that problem. And that is simply due to the fact that the majority of base jumps occur at 486 feet or 148 meters in height or less, meaning that there is much less space to make changes, like realize one parachute is bad and releasing it so that way the backup can come out. Once a base jumper has leapt into the air, they have a few seconds to be able to orient themselves correctly to release their parachute. In addition to this, instead of landing in a clear and open field, many of the locations that base jumpers leap from are surrounded by landscapes such as trees and rocks, buildings or electrical lines, and maybe even vehicles and traffic and other people. Base jumping is clearly more dangerous of the two sports, and it also is a huge draw for adrenaline junkies. And because of this event absolutely keeps search and rescue and the hospitals busy due to the draw this event has and the number of people who show up and just the amount of injuries and hang-ups that base jumping comes with. Of note, though, the area doesn't really have great cell phone reception. But this is exactly part of the reason why the Cane Creek Trail area is utilized by bikers, hikers, campers, and daredevils alike. It is tucked just off of Moab's busy highways. It's a hidden stretch of adventure and serenity that invites you to escape into a world of vivid red rock canyons and the gentle murmur of the Colorado River. Driving along the winding road bordered by rugged cliffs where the golden hues of the desert dance with the deep blues of the river below. Here, ancient petroglyphs are etched into the weathered stone, and they whisper secrets of the past civilization, while patches of unexpected green in places like Moonflower Canyon provide refreshing little oases under the vast Utah sky. People love Cane Creek for its perfect blend of tranquility and adrenaline. Adventurers revel in the off-road trails, hiking paths, and mountain biking routes that challenge them against the panoramic backdrops, while nature lovers savor the quiet moments of solitude amid the dramatic landscape. Whether you're exploring the mystical canyon entrances, discovering the hidden rock art, or simply soaking in the expansive desert views, Cane Creek offers a soulful invitation to reconnect with nature in its purest form. And that is exactly what drew Riverberry to this location today. She had her friend Kendra with her, and she wanted Kendra to experience the same thing while she was visiting River in Moab. River loves to rock climb, mountain bike, and snowboard, and while Kendra isn't a climber, she does some mountain biking, so the two head out to the Cane Creek area to do just that. As they made their way back to the parking lot, there were base jumpers everywhere. They had known the Turkey Boogie was going on, so people soaring through the air wasn't really an unexpected occurrence. The base jumpers were jumping off of a formation called the Tombstone, which looks like a giant tombstone, so it's aptly named. and it is roughly 405 feet or 123 meters high. It was during this event that a man who has remained anonymous leapt from the cliff face. At 39 years old, it wasn't his first rodeo, but he was about to be in for the ride of his life. The 400-foot or 122-meter cliff allowed for some spectacular views as jumpers flowed down to the canyon beneath them. And of course, the landscape in Utah is just incredible. And that moment of adrenaline and awe he felt was cut short when his parachute opened the wrong direction. And this is one of a few things that can go wrong when it comes to the parachute opening. In response, you would have to try to turn the parachute and therefore yourself so that way you are moving away from the cliff instead of toward it. When this man's parachute opened, he tried to grab the parachute controls, but because the chute opened backwards, they weren't where he expected them to be. It was too little, too late. Instead of being able to control where he was going, the wind ripped him backwards and slammed him into the cliff face. He made a full body impact with the rock face before he started plummeting to the floor beneath him, where onlookers watched the jumpers. He was then suddenly jolted to a stop when his parachute got caught on some rocks known as the chicken head. This man was now stuck on the cliff face with no way down, about 70 feet or 21 meters from the ground. There is a video of this, which I will be posting to the episode photos, which you can find on our social media. So I usually post them on Wednesday mornings on Instagram, Facebook, and our Patreon page. So if you want to pause now and go take a look at those, I'm going to try to have those up at midnight when this episode releases. So that way, those of you who listen to this while I'm asleep, you can go ahead and take a look at those right away. But the video is of this man's accident. So you can watch as his parachute just pulls him directly into the cliff face and the impact that he has. And it is really eye-opening because you can read the words and you can listen to me say them that, you know, he made a full body impact, but you don't quite understand how hard or how fast he hit this wall unless you're watching it. So I highly encourage that you go take a look at that. Now, switching gears a little bit, having grown up in New York, much of River's climbing experience comes from there. New York is a great place for hiking and snowboarding and climbing, and even though the mountains are small in comparison, they do offer challenges to anyone that comes to them. By the time that she was in Moab biking with Kendra, River had been climbing for about 3 to 4 years. So this was something that she learned that she loved, and even though she had only been doing it for a short time, she really dedicated herself to learning all the different techniques and the different ways of climbing and climbing on different terrain and getting into sandy spots and ice climbing. And as I mentioned, River had been mountain biking through this area, and she was at a point where she and Kendra were just ready to leave for the day. She had returned to the Tombstone parking lot of the Cane Creek area with Kendra, and that's when it happened. As she stood in the parking lot near her van and still decked out in all of her riding gear, a man suddenly ran into the parking lot in a panic. He was trying to find someone who had rock climbing gear and experience, and he happened to find exactly the right person. River had her gear in the van, and when she called out to him and showed him her bag, he essentially said, "Great, see you there." And he grabbed her bag and took off with it. River was stunned, but just for a moment, and she was eager to help this man out. And immediately she started to mentally prepare to help belay this man up the wall. Now, we have covered climbers and climbing events in previous episodes, but if you are brand new here and you're starting out here, a belayer is the person who is, in this case, would be standing on the ground. The rope is attached to the person who is climbing. It is then hooked through anchors that are at maybe different locations, or some people install anchors as they go. And the rope would then go through the carabiner on that anchor and all the way down to the ground where the belayer is standing. This person helps to stop the climber from falling in the event that the rock collapses, and in a rescue situation, they would also help guide the climber or the injured party to the ground. Once River caught up with this man and she started talking with him, she found out his name was Justin Bittler and that he was friends with the man dangling from the wall. As they worked together to get things set up, River had been correctly assuming that Justin was going to be climbing the wall to retrieve his friend. But as they worked and as Justin told her his plan, she realized that no one else really had the skill to be able to accomplish this very particular climb. No one, that is, except for her. That's not to say that Justin wasn't a skilled climber, he just didn't have the skills this particular wall was requiring. Something inside of River just clicked, and she just took control of the situation, telling those around her what they needed to do, what they needed to get, how they were going to proceed, what to check for, and essentially she saw a void in the plan, and she also saw how she could fill that void, and she didn't question it, she just stepped into the role. Now, while River has quite a bit of experience with different types of climbing and different terrains, she is not a rescue climber or trained in rescue. But what she did have is a very logical and checklist-oriented mind. She took her time to make sure that everything was where it needed to be and that her equipment was in good working order and that she would be climbing with what she thought she would need in order to bring this man down. She also admittedly had prepared for self-rescue situations, which likely also gave her some information for stepping into a rescue situation for someone else. In addition to this, River also had some survival experience because when she was in college, she took a semester away and went on a 3-month-long wilderness course that was held in Patagonia. There, her group ended up getting lost and spent 5 days getting themselves out of that situation. And it was a situation that really tested her and their ability to survive and work together in an emergency situation. One of these skills was to stop and take a step back and take stock of not only the situation, but what all equipment was there and who was with you and what skills they had, and maybe what all they could apply to the task at hand. River approached the wall and found a crack in it that led all the way up to where the man was dangling. This crack would be an excellent option for foot or handholds and a good and direct route up. The rock, though, would not make this task easy. It was crumbling easily, and the sand in the area had made it more difficult to get a solid hold on the rock because it had never been climbed before. As she climbed, she took her time. Safety was really the only option here. And as she went, she noticed that the wall had blood splattered on it, and blood was also running down from the wall, and she began to worry that she was climbing to retrieve a dead man instead of someone who was alive. Again, no one on the ground or up in the air had any idea of the condition of this man who was dangling here. Still, though, she stayed connected with herself and what she was doing, and finally, she was eye level with him. And then something happened that added a bit of a dangerous element to this rescue. A helicopter showed up. When the man had collided with the wall, someone engaged their emergency beacon and called for a rescue. And while this might be considered a good thing under normal circumstances, this man was hanging off of the cliff face by a parachute, and River was hanging onto a crack that was crumbling. The wind the helicopter produced could knock one or both people off balance and cause them to fall or get hurt. And not only that, but this man was literally hanging on by just a small portion of his parachute. If the wind hit at the right angle, it could pick up the rest of that chute and lift him from where he was hanging and drop him all the way back to the ground, which would have been a death sentence. Now, River has a tendency to sing when there's highly tense or stressful situations, which this absolutely was. And at this point, she started singing "Hey There, Delilah." But this was luckily only a short time, as the helicopter moved away once they realized that there was already a rescue in place. Once she reached this man, she was relieved to find that he was softly snoring and yelled down to Justin while she built an anchor. But this seemed to wake the man up from his daze. He started begging her to get the weight off of his leg, and this proved to be a very difficult distraction to tune out. But of course, this man was in extreme pain. He had scrapes and bruises, and his leg was bleeding badly. But River still took her time and made sure that the gear was safe as it could be before proceeding forward. River then climbed up above him so that way she would be able to transfer his weight from the parachute to her harness. Here, she built a second anchor and clipped him to her belay loop on her harness. Base jumpers' harnesses are a little bit different than rock climbing harnesses in that they're a full body harness rather than just around your pelvis. And so she used the loops that were at his chest to secure him to her. And the reason that she wanted to be above him was because this would lessen the slack that was between River and this man. So when he was cut free, there would be as little movement as possible when his weight was released from the parachute and onto River. And this is important so that way he doesn't experience a lot of movement or jolts with being clearly injured. And secondly, so that way the movement doesn't shift River too far off balance in one way or another and cause her to lose her grip and fall. She did have them anchored in though, which, as always, you should be playing it safe, but anchors have failed before. So the safest option would be to, as smoothly as possible and with as little movement as possible, get his weight from the parachute to her. And this would pay off. Once he was secured to her, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. He was no longer in danger of plummeting to the ground if the parachute shifted or tore or was blown from this rocky outcrop it had gotten caught on. With him being clipped to River, who was anchored to the wall, it just felt more secure, and arguably it is. River then began the process of cutting the parachute free. Starting with the lines that were not directly holding his weight, River made sure that they were out of the way, and then there were 3 lines left. The 3 lines that held his weight and the moment of truth if she made all of the right calls. A deep breath, and then she cut. And when the lines were severed, the man securely swung to where he was clipped into her belay loop. As Justin began to then lower them down to the floor, River did what she could to help keep the man from swinging into the wall or to keep him from tipping one way or the other too much by using her legs as touch points with the wall so that she could control where they were going and when. And this is a pretty standard technique when coming down the wall, is to more or less walk your feet down a wall, and this really only helps when the wall is like straight up and down. If you get an angle one way or the other, you either have too much contact or you lose contact. But again, to do so with a person who's in extreme pain and severely injured adds a degree of caution that climbers don't usually have to worry about. Below, Justin realized how bad of shape his friend was in when he realized that blood was not just dripping, but kind of spraying down from his leg. And then to add to the chilling realization of how precarious of a situation this man was in, as they were being lowered, they only were lowered a couple of feet when the wind picked up the parachute, lifted it from the rocks, and it actually got caught up on River and the man as it made their way to the ground. As soon as they reached the bottom, search and rescue personnel and emergency responders were there, and as they removed this man's harness and the blood started flowing from his injured leg, they applied a tourniquet themselves before loading him into the helicopter and rushing him to the hospital. What they hadn't fully realized in the midst of this rescue was that River's actions without a doubt saved this man's life. Besides his face being bloody and scraped up, he broke his femur in 5 places. His leg was actually so badly broken that there were fears about him bleeding out, but it turns out that his harness acted as a tourniquet as he was hanging from the wall, and this helped to staunch the blood flow to his legs. And this, in combination with River's quick and skillful actions, saved his life. River would later receive the Carnegie Medal for her efforts and named the crack in the wall and thus the route to save the man's life the Lifeline. River has remained friends with this man and actually went to visit him and has stated that his recovery is going well. He is from Australia, and while he does want to remain anonymous, finding a friend in a life-altering and life-saving situation can create a bond unlike any other. He was so lucky to have River there that day and able to respond to him and help him as quickly as she did. And one thing I didn't mention is that while she climbed, she tried to help keep this man calm by telling him that she was coming for him and that he was a badass. And quite frankly, I think that that last part applies to her as well. But like with everything we do in life, there is a careful balance that must be played between glory and recklessness. River stayed focused on the task in front of her. She didn't rush it even when this man's life was at risk. She made sure that her grips were good and that her anchors would hold. She made sure that all of her lines were cut and the man was free before they began to lower down. She stayed calm in the high-stress situation, which is all that we can ask for of our rescuers. Glory is likely the wrong word to use here, especially because every single rescue situation a person walks into, as a helper or as a victim, there are risks involved, and those risks could bring the end of lives beyond our own. As always, thank you for listening. I appreciate you being here. If you've enjoyed this or if you have any comments, please leave me a comment. You can talk to me on Instagram, Facebook, Patreon. If you listen on Spotify, you can do comments there as well. I hope to hear from you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time. Bye. What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithAview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.